Please like and subscribe to the channel if you find this video interesting and useful. Give me more ideas you want me to make. Enjoy watching the video. The sun, a fiery orb of judgment, beat down on Los Angeles, but inside the hallowed, albeit slightly dingy, halls of the Silverwood Apartments, a different kind of inferno brewed. This wasn't a tale of Hollywood glamour or Silicon dreams. This was the saga of two souls, separated by a single, flimsy wall, yet miles apart in every conceivable dimension of human existence. Their names were Marcus Johnson and Emily Walker, and their shared address was less a home and more a demilitarized zone. Marcus Johnson, at 26, was a walking, talking embodiment of organized chaos, emphasis on the chaos. His skin was the color of rich, dark chocolate, a stark contrast to the frequently disheveled state of his apartment, which he affectionately referred to as his creative sanctuary. A freelance sound engineer, Marcus worshipped at the altar of hip-hop, his faith expressed through speakers that could register on the Richter scale. His nights were a symphony of booming bass, punctuated by the occasional experimental fusion cooking session. These culinary adventures, while no doubt innovative in Marcus's mind, typically left an olfactory footprint that could clear a small village. He was a man of infectious, if somewhat arrogant, charm, with a philosophy best summarized as chill like there's no tomorrow, because honestly, who needs tomorrow when you've got this beat? His humor was a blend of quick wit and playful jabs, often delivered with a smirk that dared you not to laugh. He possessed an uncanny ability to turn any mundane situation into a theatrical performance, much to the exasperation of those around him. Next door, in apartment 4B, resided Emily Walker. 25 years young, with skin as fair as Marcus's was deep, Emily was the antithesis of chaos. She was a sleek, perfectly catalogued system, a human spreadsheet. Her apartment gleamed with a sterile precision that bordered on the obsessive. Every book was alphabetized, every cushion fluffed to exacting standards, and her spice rack looked like a botanical garden curator's fever dream. Emily worked as a marketing assistant for a formidable advertising agency, a role that demanded her innate organizational prowess and an almost supernatural ability to anticipate problems before they arose. Her life was a meticulously planned itinerary, a stark contrast to Marcus's free-form jazz improvisation. She even had a boyfriend, Brian, a man whose seriousness was only outmatched by his profound lack of humor. Brian, a banker, was the kind of person who ironed his socks and considered spreadsheet optimization a thrilling weekend activity. He frequently chastised Emily for being too controlling, a critique she secretly considered a badge of honor. The wall separating their apartments was less a barrier and more a conductor of their daily hostilities. It was a thin veneer over a simmering rivalry, a constant percussion section to the soundtrack of their feuds. Their conflicts were less arguments and more guerrilla warfare, fought with passive-aggressive notes, strategic noise pollution, and the occasional outright shouted confrontation. Take, for instance, the infamous 2 a.m. bass drop incident. Marcus, in a fit of late-night inspiration, decided that 2 a.m. was the perfect time to perfect a new, ground-shaking bass line for a track he was producing. The bass, a sentient entity of pure sonic force, vibrated through the floor, up the walls, and directly into Emily's meticulously organized dreams. Her response was swift and decisive, a series of calculated, rhythmic thumps against the offending wall, each one a hammer blow to Marcus's creative flow. When he finally turned it down, it wasn't out of consideration, but a grudging acknowledgement that his neighbor possessed an irritatingly effective counter-strategy. He'd mutter under his breath, "That woman has the rhythm of a broken metronome, but the persistence of a mosquito in a tent." Emily, on the other hand, had her own morning rituals that doubled as sonic weaponry. Her Dyson vacuum cleaner, a beast of technological efficiency, would roar to life precisely at 7 a.m. sharp. Not 7:01, not 6:59, but 7 a.m., a relentless mechanical beast devouring dust bunnies and Marcus's precious morning slumber. Is she trying to murder me with the sound of pure, unadulterated suction? Marcus would bellow from his bed, burying his head under a pillow in a futile attempt to escape the relentless drone. He often pictured her, a tiny, militant general, meticulously vacuuming away any stray particles of joy from his life. Then there was the notorious, mismatched mail mix-up. One fateful Tuesday, a package arrived at the Silverwood Apartments' communal mailroom. It was a rather innocuous-looking brown box addressed to Apartment 4A. Marcus, in a hurry and half asleep, grabbed it, assuming it was a new set of studio headphones he'd been expecting. Later that evening, preparing for a gig, he decided to try out his new headphones. Except, when he opened the box, it wasn't headphones. It was a luxurious, organic, bee-pollen-infused lip plumper, along with an array of exotic face masks, all clearly emblazoned with Emily's preferred brand. Marcus, ever the experimentalist, and perhaps a touch too confident in his try-anything-once philosophy, decided to try the lip plumper. After all, if it plumped, right? The result was less subtly enhanced pout and more allergic reaction to a wasp sting. His lips swelled to twice their size, giving him the appearance of a bewildered cartoon character who had just eaten a particularly spicy pepper. Emily, upon discovering her missing package and seeing Marcus's comically swollen lips, had very nearly called an ambulance, then promptly burst into a fit of uncontrolled laughter, which only infuriated Marcus further. "It's not funny, Emily. I look like I swallowed a balloon," he'd slurred, his words thick with the plumper's side effects. The noise complaint nuisance was a recurring theme. Emily, driven to her wits' end by Marcus's nocturnal symphony, would often resort to calling the building management, or, in extreme cases, the actual police. This, of course, delighted Marcus to no end. After one particularly intense police visit, where he managed to charm the officers into believing he was simply testing acoustics for a charity event, he retaliated with a passive-aggressive masterpiece. The next morning, Emily found a neon-pink sticky note plastered to her door. It read, in Marcus's flamboyant handwriting, "Cops came, music still on." "That's a victory for me, babe." Emily had torn it down, crumpled it with a furious flourish, and thrown it in the recycling bin, muttering about the audacity of some people. Their interactions were rarely civil, often devolving into a competitive sport of who could annoy the other more effectively. They were two magnets, constantly repelling, yet inextricably linked by the shared wall and a mutual, if unspoken, understanding that their rivalry was, in its own twisted way, a foundational element of their daily lives. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday, a day already fraught with the lingering scent of Marcus's experimental durian and kimchi stir-fry and Emily's passive-aggressive email about communal hallway cleanliness standards. A colossal thunderstorm, as dramatic and over-the-top as any Hollywood blockbuster, descended upon Los Angeles. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder rumbled like an angry deity, and lightning illuminated the already tense atmosphere. Marcus, ever the opportunist, saw the storm as a perfect backdrop for some moody, atmospheric beats. He had dragged his most prized possession, a vintage, custom-built sound amplifier, into the hallway, claiming the acoustics were better out there. Emily, returning from a particularly grueling day at work, clutching a steaming cup of artisan coffee and a healthy, green smoothie, found Marcus's impromptu sound studio blocking her path. "Marcus, what in the name of all that is holy are you doing?" she shrieked, her meticulously ironed blouse now threatening to sag under the hallway's humidity. Marcus, mid-tweak of a knob, barely glanced up. "Relax, Emily. Just getting some inspiration. This storm's got a vibe, you know? Perfect for some dark jazz hop." He gestured vaguely with a hand that was dangerously close to knocking her coffee. "Vibe? You're blocking the entire hallway with your monstrous equipment. And what's that smell? Is that burnt toast and despair?" Emily's nostrils flared, picking up the lingering scent of his earlier culinary disaster. "It's called creative expression, Emily. Something you wouldn't understand with your perfectly aligned life and your beige-colored soul," he retorted, his voice dripping with condescension, a playful twinkle in his eye that only served to infuriate her more. "My soul is not beige, Marcus. It's a vibrant tapestry of order and efficiency, unlike your chaotic abyss of a life," she shot back, her voice rising to a crescendo that almost matched the thunder. Move your amplifier, now, before someone trips over it. Oh, like you'd ever trip, Miss Perfect Posture, Marcus scoffed, finally turning to face her, his eyes glinting with amusement. He took a deliberate, slow sip from his own ridiculously oversized water bottle, just to annoy her. That was it. The last straw. Emily, fueled by a day of corporate bureaucracy and the existential dread of a looming marketing deadline, snapped. You know what, Marcus? Sometimes, I genuinely wish you would just disappear, she declared, her arm gesturing wildly, inadvertently knocking the plastic lid off her green smoothie. At the exact same moment, Marcus, caught off guard by her sudden outburst, startled and fumbled his own oversized water bottle, sending it cascading towards the floor. In a horrifying, slow-motion ballet of incompetence, Emily's green smoothie, a viscous emerald liquid, collided midair with Marcus's perfectly brewed artisan coffee. The resulting concoction, a swirl of muddy brown and sickly green, descended with an almost poetic grace onto the most unfortunate of targets, the very power strip connected to Marcus's prized amplifier. The amplifier, which was, of course, still plugged in. Just as the liquid apocalypse made contact, a blinding flash of lightning ripped through the sky outside, illuminating the hallway with an otherworldly glow. A deafening crack of thunder followed, reverberating through the building. The power strip, overwhelmed by the sudden deluge of liquid and the surge of electricity from the lightning, fizzled, sparked, and then exploded in a shower of tiny, dramatic sparks. A loud pop echoed through the hallway, followed by the immediate, eerie silence of a complete power outage. The building plunged into darkness. Marcus and Emily, drenched in their respective beverages and the lingering smell of ozone, stumbled backwards from the sudden electrical discharge. They both shrieked, more in surprise than pain, and collapsed onto the now slippery, smoothie and coffee-soaked hallway floor, limbs tangled, eyes wide with shock. The last sound heard before the total silence was a simultaneous, albeit muffled, scream of "You idiot" from Emily and a furious, "You absolute clumsy OF" from Marcus, their voices mingling in the darkness. A prelude to the bizarre nightmare that awaited them. They lay there, soaked and disoriented, their rivalry reaching its electrifying and utterly unforeseen climax. The stage was set for the most peculiar morning of their lives. The world, for Marcus, returned with a soft, albeit confusing, hum. He was accustomed to waking up to the insistent, booming bass of his own self-composed alarm, or the gentle, rhythmic thud of Emily's morning vacuum cleaner. Today, however, there was none of that. Instead, a strange, almost alien quiet enveloped him. He felt different. Lighter, somehow. And, surprisingly, the faint, floral scent of lavender wafted through the air, a stark contrast to the usual aroma of stale pizza and experimental incense that permeated his own apartment. His eyes fluttered open, slowly adjusting to the soft, diffused morning light filtering through unfamiliar curtains. His first conscious thought, usually a fleeting idea about a new beat or a leftover breakfast burrito, was instead a profound sense of wrongness. He felt a curious pressure on his chest, a sensation he vaguely recognized from awkward attempts at chest presses at the gym, but this was different. It felt softer, rounder. He blinked, a strange sense of dread beginning to coalesce in his stomach. He wasn't in his bed. This bed was too neat, too pristine, too pink. The sheets were crisp, almost starched, and a soft, plush duvet covered him, a far cry from his own crumpled, vaguely questionable bedding. He sat up, pushing himself with arms that felt disproportionately slender, almost delicate. His hands, usually broad and calloused from years of fiddling with audio equipment, now looked startlingly slender, with perfectly manicured, shell-pink nails. He stared at them, flexing his fingers, a silent scream building in his throat. This wasn't right. This wasn't his body. A jolt of pure, unadulterated panic shot through him, making his newly acquired, delicate stomach churn. He looked down, and that's when the full, terrifying reality of the situation slapped him across the face like a wet fish. He saw two mounds. Two distinct, unmistakable, and undeniably feminine mounds rising proudly from his chest, encased in what felt suspiciously like a very soft, very lacy, very pink silk nightgown. His eyes widened to the size of saucers. His mouth fell open, but no sound escaped. He touched one, tentatively, as if it might disappear if he pressed too hard. It didn't. It felt real. Shockingly, undeniably real. Oh hell no. The scream, when it finally erupted, was high-pitched, undeniably feminine, and utterly alien to Marcus's own deep, resonant voice. It was a shriek that could shatter glass, a primal cry of absolute horror. I have boobs, he wailed, his voice cracking with disbelief. He scrambled out of bed, his legs, which now felt incredibly long and toned, threatening to buckle beneath him. He stumbled towards the nearest reflective surface, which happened to be a full-length mirror discreetly placed behind a wardrobe door. The reflection staring back at him was not Marcus Johnson. It was Emily Walker. Her long, blonde hair, usually pulled back in a neat ponytail, was a messy tangle around her face. Her fair skin was flushed with shock. Her eyes, usually cool and composed, were wide and terrified, mirroring his own inner turmoil. And yes, definitely, undeniably, the curves of Emily's body were staring back at him. He slapped his hands over his face, then pulled them away, as if hoping the image would disappear. It didn't. This is a nightmare, he mumbled, his new voice sounding completely foreign in his ears. This is a freaking nightmare. I've been body snatched by Ms. Perfect Posture. Meanwhile, in what was undeniably Marcus's apartment, the distinct aroma of stale pizza and questionable laundry was a dead giveaway. Emily Walker was undergoing her own existential crisis. She had woken up with a groan, her head throbbing. Her first thought was that Marcus had somehow managed to amplify his bass through her skull directly. But no, the throbbing was internal. And her pillow felt lumpy and smelled faintly of something vaguely resembling old socks and cheap cologne. She stretched, but her limbs felt strangely heavy, almost muscular. She reached for her neatly folded silk sleep mask, only to find her hand was broader, larger, and covered in a fine layer of dark hair. Her breath hitched. Her heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against a chest that felt surprisingly solid, surprisingly flat. She opened her eyes, and the ceiling fan, usually a blur of efficient movement, seemed to spin with an ominous slowness. This wasn't her pristine, minimalist bedroom. This was a chaotic explosion of vinyl records, tangled wires, discarded clothes, and an alarming number of empty snack bags. This was Marcus's apartment. A cold dread seeped into her bones. She sat up, and her eyes immediately darted to the large, ornate mirror leaning against a wall, strategically placed to reflect Marcus's creative process. She saw him. Or rather, she saw Marcus. A dark-skinned man with an athletic build, his usual morning messy dreadlocks even messier than usual. He was shirtless, displaying a toned torso that she had, on occasion, begrudgingly admitted was impressive. But the eyes staring back from that familiar face were wide with an unfamiliar horror. They were her eyes. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice a deep, resonant baritone, a voice that she knew belonged to Marcus. It felt strange, alien, the vibrations rumbling in a chest that wasn't hers. She reached up, and her fingers met. Stubble. A prickly, unmistakably masculine stubble. She frantically rubbed her jawline, her breath catching in her throat. I have a beard," she shrieked, the deep voice amplifying her panic. No, 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 this can't be happening. She stumbled out of bed, tripping over a discarded pair of sneakers, and scrambled towards the mirror, her new, heavier limbs feeling clumsy and uncoordinated. She peered closer, pulling at the stubble, as if it were a costume she could simply tear off. It remained firmly attached. "This is a nightmare," she yelled, her panic growing. She instinctively started patting her chest, searching for the familiar contours of her own body, only to find the firm, unyielding reality of a man's torso. Her mind reeled. She slammed her head, accidentally, into the open wardrobe door, a dull thud echoing through the messy apartment. What is happening? What is happening? The synchronized screams, one high-pitched and feminine, the other deep and masculine, were the first indication to the other residents of the Silverwood Apartments that something was profoundly amiss on the fourth floor. Marcus, in Emily's body, clad in nothing but a pink silk nightgown that suddenly felt far too revealing, burst out of Emily's apartment, his delicate frame shaking with a mixture of terror and outrage. He stumbled towards his own door, his long, slender legs unaccustomed to the sudden burst of frantic motion. At the exact same moment, Emily, in Marcus's body, wrapped haphazardly in a towel that barely clung to her new, broader hips, flung open Marcus's door, her face a mask of primal fear and confusion. Her deep voice boomed, "Johnson, what did you do?" They collided in the narrow hallway, a chaotic tableau of gender-bending panic. Marcus, as Emily, with his new, high-pitched voice, shrieked, "Me. What did I do? Look at me. I'm you. I have these things." He gestured wildly at his chest, his pink nightgown swirling around him. Emily, as Marcus, her new, deep voice trembling with a fury she hadn't known she possessed, jabbed a finger at him. "And I am you. I have stubble. I have a different center of gravity. This is your fault, Johnson. Your stupid amplifier. Your stupid experiment." Her towel, precariously balanced, threatened to unravel. A door down the hall creaked open, and Mrs. Henderson, a sweet but notoriously nosy retiree, peered out, her eyes wide with alarm. "Is everything all right, dear? I heard such shouting. Is there a robbery?" she asked, clutching her floral bathrobe tighter. Marcus, as Emily, mortified, immediately tried to pull the pink nightgown tighter, his face flushing scarlet. He tried to lower his voice, but it came out in a strangled squeak. "No, Mrs. Henderson. Just a little domestic dispute. Everything's fine." Emily, as Marcus, seeing Mrs. Henderson, instinctively tried to cover her exposed chest, forgetting for a moment that it was Marcus's chest and much less delicate than her own. Her deep voice, however, betrayed her panic. "Yes, just a misunderstanding." Mrs. Henderson, however, was clearly not convinced. The sight of a traditionally feminine figure screaming in a pink nightgown and a traditionally masculine figure wrapped in a towel, both pointing accusatory fingers and shouting about boobs and stubble, was enough to raise several elderly eyebrows. She retreated, her door clicking shut, undoubtedly to phone her bridge club with the latest Silverwood Apartments gossip. After a few more minutes of bewildered yelling, frantic gestures, and the near unraveling of Emily's towel, they finally retreated back into Marcus's, now Emily's, apartment, slamming the door shut. The chaos of the hallway had, if nothing else, provided a temporary distraction from the sheer terror of their predicament. They stood in the messy living room, breathing heavily, staring at each other. The initial wave of panic slowly began to recede, replaced by a dawning, terrifying realization. This wasn't a dream. This was real. And they were stuck. Emily, as Marcus, ever the pragmatist, was the first to regain a semblance of composure. She took a deep, shuddering breath, her new lungs expanding with an unfamiliar power. "Okay," she said, her voice still a rumble, but now firm. "Okay, this is unprecedented. But we have to be rational." She looked at Marcus, as Emily, who was still nervously tugging at the pink nightgown. "We need a plan." Marcus, as Emily, sniffled. "A plan? My life is a plan-free zone, Emily. I improvise. And right now, my improvisation involves freaking out." He ran his hands through his new, silky blonde hair. "I feel like I'm in a bad sci-fi movie." "Well, you're in my body, so you're going to have to learn to plan," Emily retorted, her new masculine voice surprisingly authoritative. She marched over to a messy stack of papers, found a stray pen, and began to scrawl on the back of an old takeout menu. "First rule, absolute secrecy. No one can know about this. Not Brian, not your rapper friends, no one." She looked pointedly at Marcus. "Especially not Mrs. Henderson. Marcus, as Emily, nodded, chastened. Agreed. My street cred would be permanently damaged if anyone knew I was walking around in a pink nightgown. He shivered. Second rule, Emily continued, scribbling furiously. No touching. No exploring. No self-discovery in each other's bodies. We will respect boundaries. She fixed Marcus with a stern glare, her mind already anticipating his likely attempts at boundary pushing. Marcus, as Emily, raised his slender hands in surrender. Hey, I'm a gentleman. Mostly. But just saying, Emily, your assets are quite impressive. He couldn't help but glance at his reflection in a nearby window, a playful smirk starting to form on Emily's face. Emily, as Marcus, narrowed her eyes, a dangerous glint in her unfamiliar gaze. Look at my body for one more second, Johnson, and I swear I will slap you. With your own hand. Her deep voice, now laced with menace, sent a shiver down Marcus's new spine. Whoa, okay, point taken, Marcus, as Emily, stammered, his new voice cracking again. He quickly averted his gaze, though a tiny, rebellious part of his mind couldn't help but acknowledge the effectiveness of her threat. And third, Emily continued, ignoring his inappropriate comment, we find a way to reverse this. Immediately. We think about what happened last night. The lightning, the electricity, the smoothie incident. She underlined the words with a furious flourish. They stood there in silence for a moment, two souls trapped in unfamiliar vessels, staring at each other with a mixture of horror, disbelief, and a nascent, terrifying understanding that their lives had just taken a spectacularly wrong turn. The silence was only broken by Marcus, as Emily, who, after another quick, furtive glance at his new reflection, couldn't help but offer a small, slightly self-satisfied grin. Well, he said, his new, feminine voice now carrying a hint of his old arrogance, at least your body looks pretty damn good, Emily. Emily, as Marcus, let out a frustrated growl, a sound that rumbled deep in Marcus's chest. Johnson, she barked, I just told you to stop. This is not a game. This is a disaster. Hey, just appreciating the architecture. Marcus, as Emily, retorted, holding up his delicate hands defensively. The bizarre morning after had truly begun. The chaos had only just started. The shock of the morning had been a cold plunge, but the reality of their situation hit them with the force of a freight train. They still had lives to lead, jobs to do, and a carefully constructed facade to maintain. If either of them failed to show up, or showed up acting completely unlike themselves, their carefully cultivated existences would unravel faster than a cheap sweater. So, with a deep, collective sigh of resignation, one high-pitched, one low-pitched, they made a reluctant pact. For today, they would become each other. They would live each other's lives and experiment in forced empathy and extreme method acting. For Marcus, now residing in Emily's meticulously sculpted body, the morning routine was a horrifying initiation. First, there was the wardrobe. Emily's closet was a spectrum of muted professionalism, tailored skirts, crisp blouses, sensible heels, and a distinct lack of anything that screamed comfort or swagger. Marcus, a man whose daily uniform consisted of baggy jeans, oversized hoodies, and the occasional band t-shirt, stared at the racks with profound dismay. What is all this? Beige, he muttered, his new, delicate fingers plucking at a cream-colored cardigan. Where's the color? Where's the personality? He eventually settled on a pencil skirt that felt alarmingly restrictive around his new hips and a silk blouse that seemed designed to highlight his, Emily's, chest, which still felt incredibly foreign and distracting. Then came the shoes. High heels. Pointy, impossibly tall instruments of torture that Emily apparently wore with casual ease. Marcus teetered, wobbled, and very nearly face-planted attempting to navigate the simple act of walking to the kitchen. How do women do this? He grumbled, clinging to the countertop for dear life. This is like walking on stilts made of pain. The final indignity was Emily's makeup routine. Marcus, whose grooming consisted of a quick splash of water and a dab of moisturizer if he was feeling fancy, was confronted with an array of brushes, palettes, and potions that looked more like a chemistry set than cosmetics. He ended up with one eyebrow, noticeably darker than the other, and a faint streak of blush across his, Emily's, forehead. His commute to Emily's high-powered advertising agency, Sterling and Sterling, was an exercise in existential dread. The bustling Los Angeles traffic, usually a familiar backdrop to his own creative musings, now felt like a claustrophobic cage. He had to navigate Emily's sensible sedan, which smelled faintly of lemon air freshener, and had a carefully organized console with a designated spot for everything. He kept instinctively reaching for the bass boost on the radio, only to remember he was supposed to be Emily, the paragon of sophisticated calm. He practiced Emily's reserved smile in the rearview mirror, but it kept morphing into his own mischievous grin. Upon arrival at Sterling and Sterling, Marcus, as Emily, was immediately plunged into a world of polished surfaces, hushed tones, and relentless ambition. Everyone knew Emily Walker. Not just knew her, but respected her. She was the serious one, the detail-oriented goddess, the marketing prodigy. Marcus, whose professional interactions usually involved high fives and impromptu jam sessions, felt like an alien navigating a delicate ecosystem. "Morning, Emily." Looking sharp as ever, chirped a colleague, eyeing his slightly lopsided makeup. Marcus, as Emily, forced a tight smile. "Just experimenting with a new look, Brenda," he said, his voice a little too loud, a little too casual. The real challenge came during the morning pitch meeting. Emily's boss, Ms. Albright, a formidable woman with a gaze that could strip paint, called upon Emily to present the new campaign strategy for a major beauty brand. Marcus's heart, Emily's heart, hammered against his, Emily's, ribs. He knew nothing about marketing, let alone beauty products. He scanned the slides on the projector, a jumble of analytics and buzzwords that meant absolutely nothing to him. Panic began to set in. He felt the familiar urge to blurt out something sarcastic, something to deflect, but he knew Emily wouldn't do that. Emily would deliver a meticulously researched, highly articulate presentation. He took a deep breath, clutching a pen in his, Emily's, delicate hand. He looked out at the expectant faces, and a flicker of Marcus's innate showmanship ignited. If he couldn't be Emily, he'd be Marcus in Emily's body. He'd do it his way. He cleared his throat, and instead of launching into the prepared bullet points, he tapped the pen rhythmically against the podium. All right, listen up, fam," he began, his voice, though still Emily's, imbued with a newfound swagger. A ripple of surprise went through the room. Ms. Albright raised an eyebrow, a flicker of curiosity replacing her usual stern expression. "So, we're talking about glow-up cosmetics, right? We ain't just selling makeup, we're selling confidence. We're selling that feeling when you step out the door and the whole world's your runway. Know what I'm saying?" He paused, letting the unconventional opening hang in the air. He then launched into an impromptu, entirely improvised, freestyle rap about the product. His words flowed, a rhythmic cascade of marketing jargon reinterpreted through a hip-hop lens. He talked about brand identity flowing like a sick beat, about audience engagement dropping harder than a bass line, and about visuals so fire, they gonna break the internet. He gestured with Emily's hands, punctuating his points with emphatic movements, even dropping a few head bobs. He was, to put it mildly, not Emily. He was Marcus, channeling his inner marketing guru, completely uninhibited by the corporate environment. When he finished, there was a stunned silence, followed by a tentative clap, then a wave of applause that swept through the room. His, Emily's, face was flushed with exhilaration. Miss Albright, usually stoic, actually had a small, surprised smile playing on her lips. I've never seen Emily quite so dynamic," she said, her voice laced with genuine admiration. "That was unexpectedly brilliant, Emily. Truly innovative. I love it." Marcus, as Emily, beamed, a genuine, wide smile that felt good on Emily's face. "Yeah, well, Sometimes you gotta drop the corporate flow and go for the street cred, he said, then quickly caught himself. Sometimes you have to innovate beyond traditional paradigms, Ms. Albright. He winked, a gesture that Emily would never make. He felt a thrill course through him. This wasn't so bad. He started to lean into the role, taking selfies in the office bathroom mirror, experimenting with different shades of lipstick, purely for research, of course, and even subtly adjusting Emily's posture to give her a little more swagger. He was enjoying this unexpected taste of corporate fame, a stark contrast to his usual underground music scene. Emily's structured world, it turned out, had some unexpected perks. Back at Marcus's apartment, Emily, in Marcus's body, was enduring her own special brand of hell. The clothes were bad enough. Marcus's wardrobe was a monument to comfort and casual disarray. Baggy jeans, hoodies with obscure band logos, t-shirts that looked like they'd seen better decades. Emily, a woman who color-coded her socks, felt a profound sense of sartorial distress. She eventually settled on a pair of ripped jeans that felt far too loose and a hoodie that smelled faintly of Marcus's cologne and something indefinable, yet distinctly Marcus. The sneakers, however, were surprisingly comfortable, a small mercy. Her destination was Marcus's studio, which was less a professional recording space and more a glorified bedroom crammed with speakers, mixing boards, microphones, and an impressive collection of vintage synthesizers. The air hummed with the faint scent of electronics and something vaguely resembling stale weed, though Emily fervently hoped it was just a particularly potent air freshener. When she arrived, she was greeted by a cacophony of sound and a trio of Marcus's rapper friends. Big T, a burly man with an impressive chain, Lil Kev, a wiry guy with perpetual energy, and MC Flo, whose name was both a descriptor and a warning. They were all lounging around, sipping from red Solo cups, a cloud of something suspiciously herbal hanging in the air. Yo, Marcus, my man. About time you showed up, bro. Big T boomed, slapping Emily as Marcus, heartily on the back, almost sending her, his new, heavier frame sprawling. We've been waiting for that new beat, fam. Drop the heat. Emily, as Marcus, managed a strained smile, her new voice feeling gravely unfamiliar. Yeah, hey guys. Just a little delayed. Creative block, She tried to mimic Marcus's casual shrug, but it came out more like a stiff twitch. Creative block? You? Nah, man, you never got no block. Lil Kev exclaimed, looking genuinely puzzled. Come on, drop that fire, let's get this session started. Emily, as Marcus, stared at the mixing board, a bewildering array of knobs, faders, and blinking lights. It looked like the control panel of a spaceship. She had no idea how any of it worked. She fumbled with a few dials, trying to look knowledgeable, but only succeeding in producing a series of discordant squawks. Yo, what's up with the Frankenstein sounds, Marcus? MC Flo asked, his brow furrowed. That ain't your usual vibe, man. Desperate, Emily, as Marcus, remembered Marcus's vast music library. She fumbled with the computer, randomly clicking on files until a familiar melody filled the room. It was Ludwig van Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Da-da-da-da-da. The entire room went silent. Big T's solo cup clattered to the floor. Lil Kev's jaw dropped. MC Flo looked like he'd just seen a ghost, or perhaps a particularly aggressive classical music conductor. Marcus. Big T finally managed, his voice a mixture of confusion and genuine concern. You all right, man? That ain't exactly street. Emily, as Marcus, panicked. It's a new experimental fusion. Classical hip-hop. Pushing boundaries. Very avant-garde. She tried to sound enthusiastic, but her new, deep voice just made it sound more absurd. They stared at her, then at each other, a silent communication passing between them. Clearly, Marcus had lost his mind. The session continued in this bewildered state, with Emily as Marcus, trying desperately to fake her way through producing a track, mostly by randomly pressing buttons and nodding sagely. Then, an older, more established rapper, known as the Funk Master, walked in, a notoriously prickly individual who often challenged Marcus's musical choices. "Yo, Marcus," the funk master drawled, eyeing the Beethoven. "What is this elevator music noise you trying to pass off as a beat, man? You gone soft? You selling out to the symphony orchestra?" He snickered, a sneer on his face. Normally, Marcus would have a quick, witty retort, a playful jab to disarm the situation. But Emily, in Marcus's body, was not playful. She was tired, frustrated, and deeply offended by the funk master's dismissive tone. Her years of meticulously planned efficiency were clashing violently with Marcus's chaotic world, and the funk master was the straw that broke the camel's back. A surge of unfamiliar, masculine anger welled up within her. She felt a sudden, almost instinctual urge to assert dominance. Without thinking, she walked up to the funk master, who was still smirking. "Listen here, funk master," she said, her new voice a low growl, vibrating with an intensity that surprised even her. "My elevator music has more soul than your entire discography. And if you've got a problem with my artistic choices, then maybe you need a new ear." The funk master, taken aback by the sudden, aggressive shift from the usually laid-back Marcus, leaned in, clearly ready to escalate. "Oh yeah? And what are you gonna do about it, little man?" he sneered, puffing out his chest. Before Emily, as Marcus, could even consciously process it, his hand shot out. Not a slap, not a push, but a powerful, swift punch that connected squarely with the funk master's microphone, sending it flying across the room with a resounding clang. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. The funk master, wide-eyed, stared at his now mic-less hand, then at the scattered microphone, then back at Emily, as Marcus, who stood there, breathing heavily, her knuckles stinging. Big T, Lil, Kev, and MC Flo looked at each other, then back at Emily, as Marcus, with a mixture of awe and fear. "Damn, Marcus," Lil Kev whispered, his voice hushed. You just punked the funk master." Big T, ever the pragmatist, was the first to speak. "Yo, Marcus, my dude. You went full beast mode. That was legendary. You just earned mad respect, bro. Marcus today is cool as hell." Emily, as Marcus, stared at her, his hand, then at the terrified funk master, then at the awestruck faces of the other rappers. She hadn't meant to punch anything. It had just happened. A strange, unfamiliar rush of adrenaline coursed through her, his body. This was powerful. That evening, they finally reconvened in Emily's apartment, both utterly exhausted and reeling from their respective, bizarre days. Marcus, as Emily, still in his pencil skirt and blouse, kicked off Emily's heels with a sigh of relief. Emily, as Marcus, still in the ripped jeans and hoodie, immediately collapsed onto the pristine white sofa, almost knocking over a decorative cushion. "You!" Emily, as Marcus, roared, her deep voice echoing in the immaculate living room. "You completely humiliated me at work. Freestyle rap? About marketing strategy? I had to spend an hour explaining to Ms. Albright that I was simply exploring new presentation methodologies." Marcus, as Emily, threw his new hands up in exasperation. "Humiliated you? I made you look like a genius. They think you're a marketing visionary. And speaking of humiliation, you almost got me arrested. Punching the funk master's microphone. What were you thinking? He was insulting your music." Emily, as Marcus, stammered, rubbing his temples. "And he was being a complete jerk. And honestly, it just kind of happened. It turns out, this body has a bit of a temper problem." Marcus, as Emily, snorted, then burst into a fit of laughter, Emily's melodic giggles sounding completely foreign to his ears. "Oh, so now my body has a temper problem? Lady, you just tapped into my inner warrior. You're welcome, by the way. My crew thinks you're the coolest thing since sliced bread. Your crew thinks I'm a violent lunatic who plays Beethoven." Emily, as Marcus, countered, her face flushing with renewed anger. They stared at each other across the pristine living room, one in a professional blouse and skirt, the other in baggy jeans and a hoodie, both looking utterly ridiculous, and both feeling an overwhelming mix of fury and bewildered amusement. The day had been a roller coaster of identity crisis, unexpected triumphs, and profound embarrassment. And yet, beneath the anger, a strange, undeniable thread of humor began to weave itself into the fabric of their predicament. They had survived a day in someone else's skin, and the world hadn't ended. Not yet, anyway. The first day had been a shock, a bizarre initiation into the uncomfortable shoes and bodies of their sworn enemy. But as the days bled into a bewildering week, Marcus and Emily discovered that merely existing as each other was a Herculean task. Their desperate attempts to maintain their respective facades only spiraled into a series of escalating comedic disasters, each one more ridiculous and public than the last. The universe, it seemed, had a darkly ironic sense of humor, determined to expose their body-swapped predicament in the most awkward ways possible. Marcus, in Emily's body, was perhaps having the more outwardly fun time, largely because his inherent chaos agent personality was proving surprisingly effective in Emily's regimented world. The freestyle marketing incident had made Emily a legend at Sterling and Sterling, but it also opened the floodgates for Marcus's irreverent approach to her life. He started holding impromptu vibe check sessions with colleagues, replacing corporate jargon with street slang, and even convinced the team to try a new guerrilla marketing campaign involving flash mobs and a DJ. Emily's colleagues, previously intimidated by her meticulous nature, now found her, Marcus, exhilaratingly unpredictable. They called her E-Money and the Disruptor, phrases that would have sent the real Emily into a meticulous panic. However, Marcus's newfound corporate popularity came with a significant, terrifying caveat: Brian. Emily's boyfriend, Brian, the human embodiment of a tax audit, decided this was the perfect time to surprise his transformed girlfriend with a visit. He arrived at Emily's, now Marcus's, apartment unannounced, a bouquet of perfectly symmetrical roses in one hand and a freshly pressed copy of the Wall Street Journal in the other. Marcus, as Emily, nearly choked on his Emily's organic, gluten-free toast when he heard the insistent knock. He looked through the peephole and saw Brian's impeccably groomed head. "Oh, crap. It's Ken Doll," he whispered, his new, feminine voice cracking with alarm. He scrambled around the apartment, desperately trying to make it look less like Marcus had spent the last week in it. He tossed his Emily's discarded lingerie under the bed, shoved an empty pizza box into the fridge, a last-ditch effort at concealment, and smoothed down his Emily's hair. He opened the door with a forced, sweet smile, one Emily often used to placate Brian. "Brian, honey." "What a surprise," he chirped, trying to sound genuinely delighted. Brian, ever the observant one, immediately noticed something was off. "Emily, darling, you seem flustered. And is that a faint smell of stale pizza?" He sniffed the air suspiciously, his nose twitching. "And your lipstick is a shade darker than usual. And your smile, it's rather broad, almost performative." Marcus, as Emily, mentally cursed. He had, in fact, accidentally used one of his Emily's bolder, more vibrant shades. "Oh, just trying a new culinary experiment. And a bold lip for a bold woman, Brian. You know me, always innovating," he tried, injecting a little too much Marcus-esque bravado into Emily's persona. Brian, however, was not easily fooled. He spent the next hour subjecting Marcus, as Emily, to a relentless barrage of normal Emily activities. He wanted to discuss their meticulously planned summer vacation itinerary. Marcus had no idea where they were going. Review their joint investment portfolio. Marcus thought stocks were things you put in soup, and, worst of all, he wanted to cuddle. Marcus, as Emily, had to pretend to enjoy a romantic evening on the sofa, listening to Brian drone on about interest rates, all while maintaining a convincing impression of a loving girlfriend. It was sheer torture. When Brian leaned in for a kiss, Marcus instinctively recoiled, a wave of pure, unadulterated Marcus-level discomfort washing over him. He quickly recovered, turning his head so Brian only got a peck on the cheek. "Emily, you've been rather distant lately," Brian observed, his brow furrowed with suspicion. "And earlier today, when you called me, you said, 'Yo, B, what's good?' Is that a new pet name? Or are you developing some kind of linguistic tic?" Marcus, as Emily, winced. He had completely forgotten to filter his street slang. Oh, that's just a new corporate initiative. We're trying to appeal to a younger demographic with more authentic language. Very cutting edge, he bluffed, hoping Brian would buy it. Brian, however, just stared at him with an expression of profound confusion, as if Emily had suddenly started speaking in tongues. Authentic language? Emily, darling, are you experiencing some kind of stress-induced verbal dysphagia? He reached out to touch Marcus's, Emily's, forehead, checking for a fever. Perhaps you're overworking yourself. You seem looser, less controlled. He meant it as a criticism, but Marcus, as Emily, took it as a compliment. He almost fist-bumped Brian, then remembered himself just in time. The evening ended with Marcus, as Emily, making an excuse about an early work meeting, practically shoving Brian out the door, and then collapsing onto the sofa with a groan of relief. Note to self, he muttered, avoid Ken doll at all costs. Meanwhile, Emily, in Marcus's body, was grappling with a different kind of disaster, the chaotic, unpredictable world of Marcus's social life. While she had initially enjoyed the unexpected physical power of Marcus's body, like the microphone incident, she quickly realized that Marcus's friends had a penchant for truly bad ideas. The biggest culprit was Lil Kev, who, still buzzing from Emily's, as Marcus's, takedown of the Funk Master, decided to throw a spontaneous party at a local dive bar to celebrate Marcus's new savage energy. Emily, as Marcus, tried to refuse, citing an urgent need to organize a concept completely foreign to Marcus's friends, but Lil Kev was insistent. Come on, bro. You gotta celebrate. We'll make some beats, chill, maybe hit up the dance floor. Emily, as Marcus, reluctantly agreed, hoping she could just blend into the background. She was still struggling with the nuances of Marcus's posture and gait, often walking with a stiff, almost militaristic stride that earned her puzzled glances from passers-by. At the bar, the music was deafening, the air thick with smoke and the smell of cheap beer. Emily, who preferred quiet evenings with a good book and a glass of artisanal kombucha, felt profoundly out of place. Her biggest mistake was accepting a drink. Lil Kev pressed a large, murky concoction into her, Marcus's, hand. Try this, fam. Marcus is special. It'll get your creative juices flowing. Emily, trying to be a good Marcus, took a tentative sip. It tasted like battery acid mixed with sugar. But after a few more sips and a lot of peer pressure, the alcohol began to take effect. Emily, who rarely drank anything stronger than a glass of Pinot Grigio, found Marcus's larger, more resilient body absorbing the alcohol at an alarming rate. Suddenly, the loud music wasn't so bad. The smoky air felt less offensive. The chaotic energy of the bar felt liberating. She started to loosen up, swaying awkwardly to the music. Lil Kev, noticing her newfound, albeit clumsy, enthusiasm, slapped her on the back. Yo, Marcus. You feelin' the beat, my man? Let's hit the dance floor. Show 'em how it's done. Emily, as Marcus, emboldened by the potent drink, puffed out her chest. Dance? I can dance. I'm a natural mover. I'm rhythm incarnate. She stumbled onto the dance floor, where a circle had formed for a freestyle rap battle. The MC called for participants. Who's got the lyrical fire? Who's gonna drop the truth? Lil Kev nudged Emily as Marcus forward. Go on, Marcus. Show drop some of that classical hip-hop on Emily, as Marcus, completely inebriated and fueled by a surge of uncharacteristic bravado, grabbed the mic. All right, yo, she slurred, her deep voice booming through the speakers. I'm Marcus, and I'm here to drop some truth bombs. She then launched into a completely incoherent, off-key rap that was less about rhythm and more about her frustration with dirty dishes and inefficient marketing strategies. It was a train wreck of disjointed thoughts, punctuated by exaggerated hand gestures that nearly knocked out the rapper next to her. The crowd stared, utterly bewildered. Some even started laughing. Just as her performance reached its painful crescendo, a large, beefy man, clearly annoyed by her rambling, grabbed her arm. Hey, buddy. You're making a fool of yourself. Why don't you get off the stage? He growled, his grip tightening. The real Emily would have politely, but firmly, extricated herself from the situation. But Emily, in Marcus's body, was drunk, frustrated, and imbued with Marcus's latent physical strength. The memory of the Funk Master incident, a strange sense of newfound power, flashed through her mind. Without a second thought, Emily, as Marcus, wound back his fist and delivered a solid, if slightly clumsy, punch directly to the man's nose. There was a sickening crunch, and the man reeled backward, clutching his face, blood spurting between his fingers. The bar erupted into chaos. Patrons shrieked, glasses shattered, and the music abruptly cut out. Sirens wailed in the distance. Lil Kev, wide-eyed, grabbed Emily as Marcus by the arm. Yo, Marcus. You just broke that dude's nose. The cops are coming. We gotta bounce. Emily, as Marcus, suddenly sobered by the sight of blood and the sound of approaching sirens, felt a fresh wave of panic. Oh my God. I punched him. I actually punched him. This is a nightmare. They bolted out of the bar, Lil Kev dragging Emily, as Marcus, through the chaotic crowd. They ran for blocks, turning down alleyways, narrowly escaping a squad car. Eventually, they ducked into the most inconspicuous place they could find, an all-night donut shop, brightly lit and smelling of sugar and frying oil. They scrambled behind the counter, trying to look like employees, pulling on oversized aprons and grabbing donut tongs. The actual employees, a pair of bewildered teenagers, stared at them, too stunned to react. Emily, as Marcus, stood there, panting, clutching a jelly-filled donut as if it were a weapon, Marcus's large frame feeling both powerful and utterly vulnerable. Marcus, as Emily, eventually burst through the swinging door of the donut shop, Emily's, heels clicking frantically on the tiled floor. He had been looking for Emily, as Marcus, for the past hour, a frantic text message from Lil Kev about Marcus going berserk and punching some dude, having sent him into a panic. He saw Emily, as Marcus, behind the counter, covered in donut sugar, Marcus's hoodie askew, and a very confused look on Marcus's face. What in the actual hell, Emily? Marcus, as Emily, shrieked, his voice straining. I sent you to a bar, not a boxing match. You're out here fighting like Fast and Furious. Failed audition edition. Emily, as Marcus, glared back, her deep voice thick with exasperation. Me? If you hadn't sent me to that den of iniquity in the first place, I wouldn't be hiding in a donut shop in a hoodie that smells like old gym socks. You're lucky I didn't actually get arrested. She gestured wildly with the donut tongs, nearly impaling a glazed cruller. Arrested? My reputation. My street cred. You just shattered it, Emily. I'm going to be known as the dude who got drunk and rapped about spreadsheets. Marcus, as Emily, wailed, throwing Emily's, hands up dramatically, nearly knocking over a display of sprinkles. And I'm going to be known as the marketing assistant who moonlights as a thug. Emily, as Marcus, shot back, pushing a tray of Boston creams forward with an unnecessary amount of force. They stood there, two mismatched souls in the wrong bodies, surrounded by the sweet, comforting smell of donuts, their arguments echoing off the tiled walls. The chaos of their swapped lives had reached a new, sugar-coated crescendo. They were not only living each other's lives, but actively, spectacularly ruining them. The question wasn't just how to reverse the swap, but how to salvage what little dignity they had left. The disasters were piling up, and they were rapidly running out of places to hide. The donut shop escape, while momentarily exhilarating in its sheer absurdity, marked a turning point. The laughter and recriminations had faded, replaced by a grim realization that their individual efforts to navigate this body swap nightmare were only making things exponentially worse. Their lives, once distinct and predictable, were now a tangled mess of mistaken identities, professional blunders, and escalating legal woes. Emily had received a rather stern text from Lil Kev about the broken nose incident, implying damages were involved. Sitting in Emily's immaculately organized living room the next morning, Marcus, as Emily, and Emily, as Marcus, looked utterly defeated. Marcus, still in Emily's professional attire, had removed the tortuous heels, his, Emily's, feet propped up on a velvet ottoman. Emily, still in Marcus's baggy clothes, slouched on the sofa, looking deeply uncomfortable. The air was thick with the scent of Emily's calming lavender diffuser, a stark contrast to their inner turmoil. "Okay, Emily," as Marcus finally said, her deep voice heavy with a new kind of weariness. "This isn't working. We can't keep living like this. Brian thinks I'm having a psychotic break, your friends think you're a violent maniac who raps about office supplies, and I'm pretty sure I just got Marcus blacklisted from every bar south of Sunset Boulevard." She rubbed his temples, a growing headache throbbing behind her, his eyes. Marcus, as Emily, nodded, the playful glint in Emily's eyes completely extinguished. "And I almost had to actually kiss Brian. The horror. Seriously, Emily, how do you do it? The man thinks spreadsheets are foreplay." He shuddered. "No offense, but your life is meticulously exhausting. And mine is apparently a magnet for police attention when you're in it." He sighed, a dramatic, feminine sigh. "We need a real plan. Not my usual wing-it plan. A Emily-level plan." A flicker of hope ignited in Emily's, as Marcus's, eyes. "Exactly. We pool our resources. We find a solution. No more improvising, Johnson. This is serious." She stood up, Marcus's frame radiating a newfound sense of purpose. "Let's retrace our steps. What happened that night? The lightning. The amplifier. The beverages." They spent the next few hours meticulously dissecting the night of the swap. Marcus, with his technical expertise, focused on the amplifier. He dragged it back into Emily's apartment, ignoring her horrified gasps at the sight of its grime, carefully examining its scorched wires and melted components. "Okay, so this baby got a direct hit," he explained, holding up a charred wire. "The lightning, the juice, the liquid, it created some kind of unique electrical surge. A quantum fluctuation, maybe?" He ran his fingers through Emily's hair, a look of intense concentration on her face. "It's like the universe decided to prank us with a highly specific, electrically charged body-swapping vortex." Emily, meanwhile, was buried in research. She had Marcus's laptop open, multiple tabs overflowing with esoteric search terms: body swap phenomena, electrical surges and consciousness transfer, ancient rituals for soul retrieval, and even do ghosts use power strips? She dismissed the more outlandish results, focusing on anything that mentioned lightning, electricity, or even, strangely, true emotional connection. It was in a dimly lit corner of the internet, on a forum dedicated to urban legends and New Age spiritualism, that she found something intriguing. A post from a user named MysticMaven88 detailed an old folklore about body swaps, claiming that such reversals often required a recreation of the original conditions, including a powerful electrical discharge and a moment of genuine, heartfelt connection between the swapped individuals. "Want to swap back?" the post concluded. "You need another bolt of lightning and the power of true feelings." Emily, as Marcus, read the post aloud, her deep voice tinged with skepticism. "Okay, true feelings? This sounds like something out of a bad rom-com, Johnson. And another bolt of lightning? Are we supposed to just stand outside in a thunderstorm again?" Marcus, as Emily, paused from fiddling with the amplifier. "Rom-com, huh? Well, we're kind of living one right now, aren't we? And another bolt of lightning. Maybe not actual lightning. Maybe we can simulate it. Recreate the exact conditions, down to the last drop of green smoothie and artisanal coffee." A mischievous glint returned to Emily's eyes. "It's worth a shot. What do we have to lose? Our remaining dignity." They decided to attempt a recreation in the hallway, the scene of the original crime. They gathered their props, the now repaired, by Marcus, amplifier, the exact same brand of green smoothie, and an identical cup of artisanal coffee. Marcus even made sure the amplifier was plugged into the exact same power strip, which he had meticulously, and surprisingly, for Marcus, fixed. Emily, as Marcus, watched with a growing sense of trepidation. "Are you sure this is safe, Johnson? We could electrocute ourselves. or blow out the entire building's power again. Marcus, as Emily, waved a dismissive hand. Details, details. Science requires sacrifice, Emily. Plus, I added extra safety breakers this time. Probably. They positioned themselves in the exact spots they had been in during the original incident. Marcus, as Emily, held the green smoothie. Emily, as Marcus, clutched the coffee. They even started arguing, trying to recreate the same escalating tension. You know, Emily, Marcus, as Emily, began, his voice taking on a familiar, annoying tone. I still think your color-coded pantry is a cry for help. And I still think your idea of clean is when the mold on your shower curtain forms an interesting pattern. Marcus, Emily, as Marcus, shot back, a flicker of genuine irritation and a touch of performance in his eyes. They raised their cups, ready to accidentally spill them onto the power strip. Marcus had even set up a speaker to play some highly energetic EDM, hoping the vibrations would add to the energy. All right, on 3, Marcus, as Emily announced. 1, 2, 3. They simultaneously flung their cups, the green and brown liquids arcing gracefully towards the power strip. The liquids made contact. There was a brief, satisfying sizzle. The EDM music blared louder. They braced themselves for the flash of light, the jolt, the glorious return to their own bodies. Instead, there was a pathetic little sputter, followed by a loud, ominous thud that reverberated through the hallway. Then utter silence. Not just their power strip, but the entire hallway, then the entire floor, and then, with a cascade of clicks and whirs, the entire building plunged into darkness. The only sound was the distant wail of a burglar alarm triggered by the sudden power failure. Oh, for crying out loud! Emily, as Marcus, groaned, her shoulders slumping. You blew out the main circuit breaker again, Johnson. Before Marcus, as Emily, could even formulate a witty retort, the stern, booming voice of Mr. Henderson, the building's grizzled, perpetually annoyed security guard, echoed from the stairwell. All right, who's causing trouble on the 4th floor now? I just reset the main breaker 5 minutes ago. Is that you, Johnson? And, Miss Walker, what are you doing with all that equipment? Mr. Henderson, armed with a flashlight, emerged from the darkness, his beam illuminating the scene. Marcus, as Emily, covered in green smoothie, standing next to a smoking power strip. Emily, as Marcus, dripping coffee, holding a now soggy microphone, and the air thick with the smell of ozone and burnt sugar. Oh, hi, Mr. Henderson. Marcus, as Emily, chirped nervously, trying to sound innocent. Just a little electrical issue. Electrical issue? You blew out the whole damn building. Again. Mr. Henderson thundered, his flashlight beam sweeping across their guilty faces. Both of you, down to the basement, now. I want an explanation, and I want it with the main breaker not sparking like a 4th of July fireworks show. Defeated, humiliated, and still very much in the wrong bodies, Marcus and Emily trudged down to the building's dusty, dimly lit basement, following the glow of Mr. Henderson's flashlight. They sat on 2 overturned crates, surrounded by forgotten storage boxes, old pipes, and the hum of the emergency generator. The air was cool and damp, and the only light came from a single, flickering fluorescent bulb. They sat in silence for a long time, the earlier anger replaced by a profound sense of helplessness. Mr. Henderson had left them there, promising to return once he'd reset everything and filed a formal complaint. Well, Marcus, as Emily finally said, his voice softer now, stripped of its usual bravado. That didn't work. And now we're officially the most hated residents in Silverwood Apartments. Emily, as Marcus, let out a long, weary sigh. At least you didn't get another nose broken. But still, a spectacular failure. She looked at him, Emily. You know, Marcus, I always thought you were just a loud, arrogant slacker. No real goals, no ambition. Just noise and bad smells. Marcus, as Emily, looked down at Emily's slender hands, picking at a loose thread on the sleeve of Emily's blouse. And I always thought you were just a stuck-up, control-freak robot, Emily. All rules and no fun. Obsessed with order to cover up. What, exactly? The single fluorescent bulb flickered overhead, casting long, dancing shadows on the concrete walls. The air, usually charged with their mutual animosity, was now filled with something different, a fragile, tentative honesty. Emily, as Marcus, shifted on the crate, her heavy frame feeling surprisingly comfortable for the first time. I guess I was always afraid of chaos. Afraid of not being in control. My life always felt like it was on the verge of falling apart, so I tried to hold it together with rules and schedules. His voice was low, almost a whisper, the deep timbre of Marcus's voice making her confession sound profoundly vulnerable. Marcus, as Emily, looked up, Emily's eyes meeting hers, Marcus's. He saw not the uptight Emily he had always resented, but a woman grappling with her own insecurities. He murmured, genuinely surprised. I never thought of it that way. For me, it was always about making noise, making my mark, proving I existed. I figured if I was loud enough, nobody could ignore me. And yeah, maybe I used the chill thing to cover up being a bit lazy sometimes. Or scared to really commit to something. He gave a small, self-deprecating chuckle, a sound that was surprisingly endearing coming from Emily's mouth. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of their confessions hanging in the air. The shared vulnerability, born from the absurdity of their situation, had cracked open something unexpected. In the dusty, forgotten depths of the Silverwood apartment's basement, amidst the discarded junk and the flickering lights, they were, for the first time, seeing past the facades, past the rivalry, and actually listening to each other. They were still in the wrong bodies, still utterly bewildered, but somehow, in that moment, they felt a strange, undeniable sense of closeness. The beginning of a connection, forged not in romance, but in shared, spectacular failure and a raw, unexpected honesty. The seeds of true feelings had, quite literally, been planted in the dark. The shared moment of vulnerability in the dim, dusty basement had been a small, almost imperceptible tremor, but it was enough to crack the foundation of their long-standing animosity. The forced proximity, the shared humiliation, and the profound, undeniable weirdness of living inside each other's skin began to chip away at their preconceived notions. The bitter rivalry didn't vanish overnight, but it softened, like a stubbornly frozen pond slowly thawing in the spring sun. They were still Marcus and Emily, but they were also, uniquely, Marcus as Emily and Emily as Marcus, inhabiting a liminal space of forced empathy that was slowly, subtly, changing them both. The reversal protocol incident, though a spectacular failure in its primary goal, had inadvertently kick-started a new phase, reluctant cooperation. They realized that their individual lives were still spiraling, and the only way to minimize the damage was to actually help each other. This led to a series of increasingly bizarre coaching sessions, often held late at night in one of the others' apartments, where they would brief each other on the intricacies of their respective worlds. Marcus, in Emily's body, found himself surprisingly effective at navigating the corporate world, not by becoming Emily, but by injecting Emily's persona with a dose of Marcus's confident, if unconventional, charm. Emily's colleagues, initially wary of Marcus's sudden shift in personality, had grown to appreciate his directness and surprisingly innovative ideas. Marcus started encouraging Emily to speak up more in meetings, to trust his instincts, and to even, on occasion, crack a joke. He found himself defending his decisions with a passion that surprised him. He helped Emily's team develop a viral marketing challenge that actually went viral, earning Emily, a glowing commendation from Ms. Albright. "Emily, you've really blossomed," Ms. Albright had said, a rare, genuine smile on her face. Marcus, as Emily, had felt a strange warmth spread through him at the praise, a feeling he realized was a tiny sense of pride for Emily's professional success. He even started using Emily's professional planner, not to meticulously organize, but to jot down random bursts of inspiration and clever comebacks. He was unwittingly helping Emily become more assertive, more confident, and even a little more expressive, transforming her into the e-money legend. He taught her, himself, to laugh more freely, to not take everything so seriously, and to embrace a little bit of playful chaos. Conversely, Emily, in Marcus's body, was doing her best to inject some semblance of order into Marcus's chaotic existence. She started by tackling his apartment, which had always been a source of profound personal offense for her. Armed with cleaning supplies and a grim determination, she transformed the creative sanctuary into something resembling a living space, albeit one still prone to creative outbursts. She organized his records, cleared away the mountains of discarded snack wrappers, and even managed to get his laundry done. Marcus's friends, initially bewildered by Marcus's sudden penchant for tidiness, were now starting to appreciate the fact that they no longer had to navigate a minefield of forgotten pizza boxes to reach the mixing board. Emily also began to instill in Marcus a sense of planning and time management. She created a schedule for his freelance projects, helped him set deadlines, and even introduced him to the concept of a to-do list, much to Marcus's initial horror. She helped him manage his finances, which were, predictably, a mess. She discovered a latent talent for business negotiation in Marcus's body, securing him, Marcus, a better deal on a new music software package. She was, without realizing it, helping Marcus become more responsible, more organized, and more focused, nudging him towards realizing his creative potential in a more structured way. She even started listening to his hip-hop beats, genuinely trying to understand the intricacies of his music, offering surprisingly insightful feedback. Their daily interactions, once filled with snark and accusations, evolved into something resembling a very odd, highly dysfunctional partnership. They'd meet in Emily's apartment after work, Marcus as Emily, shedding his restrictive heels with a dramatic groan, Emily as Marcus, collapsing onto the pristine sofa with a weary sigh. They'd recount the day's events, sharing anecdotes and advice, their laughter echoing through the usually quiet apartment. One particularly warm evening, after a grueling day of corporate pitches for Marcus, as Emily, and a surprisingly productive recording session for Emily, as Marcus, they decided to escape the confines of their swapped lives for a few hours. They went for a walk on the beach, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Marcus, as Emily, dressed in a flowing sundress, a choice he had initially resisted, but found surprisingly comfortable, walked alongside Emily, as Marcus, who wore a simple t-shirt and shorts. They walked in comfortable silence, the rhythmic crash of the waves providing a soothing backdrop. They eventually found a deserted stretch of boardwalk and sat down, their feet dangling over the edge, watching the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. The air was soft, a gentle breeze rustling Marcus's hair and Emily's dress. The usual tension between them was gone, replaced by a quiet, almost tender camaraderie. Marcus, as Emily, was the first to break the silence, Emily's voice soft, almost wistful. "You know, Emily," he began, kicking Emily's bare feet gently in the air, "if I was still me, and you were still you, and we weren't, this," he gestured vaguely at their swapped bodies, "I think I would have actually really liked you." He looked at her, Marcus, a genuine, open expression on Emily's face, devoid of his usual playful arrogance. "Like, really liked you. Beyond the whole annoying neighbor thing. You're surprisingly strong and smart, and you actually care about things." Emily, as Marcus, turned his gaze meeting Emily's. The sunset cast a warm glow on Marcus's face, softening his usual sharp features. She felt a strange flutter in his chest, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through Marcus's body. "That's quite a confession, Johnson," she said, her deep voice a little unsteady. "And coming from you, that's something." She paused, then took a deep breath. "And if I was still me and you were still you, I think I would have seen past the noise, beyond the chaos. You're actually pretty thoughtful and talented." And funny when you're not being a complete jerk. She smiled, a genuine, soft smile that felt natural on Marcus's face. They looked at each other, the weight of their confessions hanging in the salty evening air. The words, spoken in borrowed voices, carried an undeniable truth. The absurdity of their situation, the sheer inconvenience of it all, had forced them to truly see each other, stripped away of their usual defenses and pretenses. They had experienced each other's joys, frustrations, and vulnerabilities firsthand. They had walked a mile in each other's shoes, literally. Marcus, as Emily, chuckled, a soft, melodic sound. "Well, that's a problem then, isn't it?" he said, his eyes twinkling again. Emily, as Marcus, raised an eyebrow. "Problem? How so, Johnson?" Because Marcus, as Emily, leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a playful whisper, "The problem is, you're currently in me." Emily, as Marcus, blinked, then burst into a surprised, deep laugh, a sound that rumbled charmingly from Marcus's chest. Marcus, as Emily, joined in, his own giggles mingling with her deep chuckles. They laughed until tears streamed down their faces, the sheer, mind-bending absurdity of their predicament finally hitting them in a way that felt liberating rather than frustrating. The laughter faded, leaving them with a quiet, comfortable camaraderie. The sun had fully dipped below the horizon, leaving only the soft, ethereal glow of twilight. They looked out at the vast expanse of the ocean, the endless possibilities it represented. In their swapped bodies on that quiet beach, something profound had shifted. The animosity had dissolved, replaced by a growing, undeniable warmth. They were no longer just two incompatible neighbors. They were two souls, intricately linked by a bizarre twist of fate, who had, against all odds, found a genuine, if complicated, connection. The feelings had started to shift, subtly, irrevocably, setting the stage for the next, most crucial chapter of their body-swapped romance. The laughter on the beach had been more than just a release. It was a testament to the unexpected bond they had forged. The past weeks, filled with comical mishaps and profound revelations, had melted away the layers of resentment and prejudice that once defined their relationship. They were no longer just Marcus and Emily, the warring neighbors. They were confidants, reluctant partners in an absurd cosmic joke, and, in a way neither could have predicted, friends. And perhaps, just perhaps, something more. The true feelings that Mystic Maven 88 had mentioned in the dusty internet forum had, indeed, begun to bloom. Their newfound camaraderie, however, did not diminish the urgency of their predicament. Living in someone else's skin, no matter how much you came to appreciate their inner workings, was still fundamentally disorienting. Marcus, as Emily, was growing increasingly tired of the constant vigilance required to maintain Emily's pristine image, and Emily, as Marcus, longed for the simple comfort of her own body, even if it meant giving up Marcus's unexpected physical prowess. They both craved their own identities back, not just for practical reasons, but for a profound sense of self. One evening, as another fierce thunderstorm rolled into Los Angeles, mirroring the night their lives had irrevocably changed, a flicker of hope ignited. The sky outside their windows was a theatrical canvas of bruised purples and ominous grays, punctuated by blinding flashes of lightning. The air crackled with raw, untamed energy. They had been discussing their increasingly complex double lives in Emily's apartment. Marcus, as Emily, was attempting to fix a loose button on Emily's favorite blouse, an act of domesticity that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. Emily, as Marcus, was meticulously organizing her music files, a task she had taken on with a surprising amount of dedication. "This is it," Marcus, as Emily, said, holding up the mended blouse. "This is our chance. The storm. It feels just like that night." Emily's, voice was filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "The universe is giving us a do-over." Emily, as Marcus, looked out the window, a flash of lightning illuminating his face. "It's risky, Johnson. What if it goes wrong again? What if we swap with Mrs. Henderson?" She shivered at the thought, a deep rumble emanating from Marcus's chest. "Hey, don't jinx it." Marcus, as Emily, playfully slapped his arm, a surprisingly gentle gesture. We've learned a lot since then. We know the key elements, the electricity, the surge, and now, the true feelings part. We got that covered, right? He gave him, a hopeful look, a genuine smile gracing Emily's lips. Emily, as Marcus, met Emily's gaze, and a warmth spread through his chest. Yeah, she said, her deep voice soft. I think we do. They decided to return to Marcus's apartment, the scene of the actual original electrical incident, believing it held some residual energy from the initial swap. They dragged the now fully repaired and even slightly upgraded by Marcus amplifier back into Marcus's bedroom, positioning it precisely where it had been that fateful night. They reconnected the now much safer power strip, ensuring everything was exactly as it had been, sans the spilled liquids this time. The air in the room was thick with anticipation, tinged with the familiar sense of Marcus's apartment, which Emily no longer found entirely offensive. As the storm intensified, the windows rattling with each thunderclap, they stood side by side, facing the amplifier. Marcus, as Emily, held a rewired microphone, her hands a little sweaty. Emily, as Marcus, had a hand resting on the mixing board, ready to hit the power switch. Okay, Emily, as Marcus said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. We need to focus. Think about wanting to be back. Think about us. And everything we've learned. Got it, Marcus, as Emily breathed. Emily's eyes closed for a moment. He thought about the joy of his own booming voice, the comfort of his own baggy clothes, the smell of his own creative chaos. But he also thought about Emily, the real Emily, and the unexpected friendship they had built. He thought about how much he respected her and how much he genuinely enjoyed their new connection. Ready? Emily, as Marcus asked, her finger hovering over the switch. Ready as I'll ever be. Marcus, as Emily replied, opening her eyes, a mischievous glint back in them. But just for the record, Emily, your body's actually pretty efficient. I'm going to miss the clear skin. Emily, as Marcus rolled his eyes, a fond exasperation in his deep laugh. And I'm going to miss being able to reach the top shelf without a step stool, Johnson. Just as he was about to flip the switch, a bolt of lightning, far more intense than any before, struck the building with a deafening crack. The entire apartment shuddered. A brilliant, blinding flash of pure white light erupted from the amplifier, illuminating the room with an otherworldly glow. The electrical surge was immediate and powerful. Both Marcus, as Emily, and Emily, as Marcus, screamed, a synchronized cry of shock and sudden disorientation. They were thrown backward, their bodies colliding with a force that sent them sprawling to the floor, once again drenched, this time not in smoothie and coffee, but in the crackling, static-laden air of pure electrical discharge. The room plunged into a momentary, eerie darkness, the only sound the fading hum of the electrical feedback and the frantic pounding of their own hearts. The world returned to Marcus with a familiar, yet entirely new sensation. He felt heavy, solid. His limbs were his own, strong and well-muscled. He reached up, and his fingers met the familiar texture of his own dreadlocks. He patted his chest and felt the distinct contours of his own, very masculine, pectorals. No more mounds. He let out a gasp, a deep, resonant, undeniably Marcus gasp. He sat up, his head throbbing, and looked down. His dark skin, his broad hands, his baggy shorts and t-shirt, which had somehow survived the electrical maelstrom, were all his. He was Marcus. He was back. A wave of profound relief washed over him, making him giddy. He looked over at the other figure stirring on the floor, who was slowly, tentatively sitting up. Her hair, long and blonde, was a tangled mess around her face. Her hands, delicate and pale, covered her eyes for a moment before slowly dropping. She looked down at herself, at the soft, familiar curves of her own body, at the simple, comfortable nightgown she had been wearing before the chaos. She touched her face, her jawline smooth and free of any stubble. "Oh my God," Emily whispered, her voice a soft, melodic, undeniably Emily whisper, tears welling in her eyes. I'm me." She looked up at Marcus, a radiant, tearful smile blooming on her face. "Marcus, we did it. We're back." Marcus scrambled over to her, his movements fluid and natural in his own body. He grabbed her hands, his rough palms enveloping her delicate ones. "Emily, you're you. I'm me." He laughed, a booming, joyous laugh that echoed through the room. No more pencil skirts. No more makeup. No more boobs. He almost cried with relief. They stood there for a moment, simply staring at each other, reveling in the glorious, familiar comfort of their own skin. The storm outside had begun to subside, the rain a gentle patter against the windows. The sun, a hesitant sliver of orange, peeked through the clouds, casting a soft, golden glow into the room. But as the initial euphoria began to settle, they both noticed something different. Marcus, still clutching Emily's hands, caught a glimpse of his reflection in the darkened window. He instinctively straightened his shoulders, a subtle, almost imperceptible adjustment to his posture. His once perpetually messy room, though still retaining its Marcus-esque charm, was noticeably tidier than before. And he felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to moisturize. He muttered, running a hand over his face. I think I just remembered that Emily's expensive face cream actually feels pretty good." Emily, meanwhile, noticed a change in herself too. She found herself swaying slightly, tapping her foot to an unheard rhythm. A low, throaty hum escaped her lips, a sound eerily similar to a hip-hop beat. She then caught herself using a phrase she would never have uttered before the swap. "Yo, Marcus," she said, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. I think I just remembered that your chill as hell attitude sometimes makes life a lot easier." They looked at each other, their eyes wide with a shared, amused realization. "Well," Marcus said, a genuine, soft smile on his face, "looks like we both left a little bit of a mark on each other, didn't we?" He gestured between them. "I'm tidier, you're a little more spontaneous." Emily laughed, a warm, melodic sound. "And I'm pretty sure I'm going to start dropping your weird slang in board meetings, Marcus." She shook her head, still smiling. "This is going to be interesting." They were back in their own bodies, but they were irrevocably changed. The experience had not just swapped their physical forms, it had swapped pieces of their souls, imprinting them with the essence of the other. The transformation was complete, and the real journey, the journey of two changed individuals navigating a new, more nuanced world, had only just begun. The second bolt had brought them back, but it had also, perhaps, brought them closer than ever before. The aftermath of the second bolt of lightning was not merely a physical return to their original bodies, but a complete recalibration of their internal landscapes. Marcus was still Marcus, but a Marcus who now instinctively straightened cushions, understood the subtle art of color coding, and occasionally found himself humming classical melodies. Emily was still Emily, but an Emily who sometimes preferred comfort over couture, who had a surprisingly well-developed ear for hip-hop beats, and who, to her own shock, occasionally let a "yo, what's good" slip out during a client meeting. They were the same, yet profoundly different, two individuals forever imprinted with the essence of the other. In the weeks that followed, their relationship transformed from reluctant alliance to genuine, undeniable friendship. They no longer communicated with passive-aggressive notes or shouted accusations across the hallway. Instead, casual texts and impromptu chats became the norm. They found themselves gravitating towards each other, drawn by the unique understanding they now shared. Their shared secret, the mind-bending experience of living each other's lives, had forged a bond deeper than any they had ever known. One afternoon, Emily called Marcus, her voice light. "Marcus, Brian broke up with me." Marcus, who was surprisingly engrossed in alphabetizing his new spice rack, a habit picked up from Emily's influence, paused. "Oh, man, I'm sorry to hear that. Are you okay?" Emily let out a small, relieved sigh. "Honestly, I'm fine. More than fine. He said I'd changed too much, that I was less predictable and too spontaneous. And you know what? He was right. And I'm actually okay with it. More than okay, actually. It feels liberating. She chuckled. I think he preferred the old, hyper-organized Emily. The one who hadn't punched a guy in a bar. Marcus laughed, a deep, warm sound. Hey, you brought out the inner beast, Em. And honestly, you deserve someone who appreciates the new, improved, badass Emily. The one who can drop a beat and a punch. He paused, then took a leap. So, since you're now a free agent, and I've finally figured out how to use a placemat, how about I make you dinner tonight? My place. And I promise, no experimental durian and kimchi fusion this time. Just actual good food. And jazz, not EDM. Emily smiled, a genuine, delighted smile that stretched across her face. I'd like that very much, Marcus. Very much indeed. That evening, Emily walked over to Marcus's apartment, a subtle nervousness fluttering in her stomach. She braced herself for the usual organized chaos, but when Marcus opened the door, she stopped dead. The apartment, while still reflecting Marcus's personality, was clean. Not sterile Emily clean, but a comfortable, inviting clean. The records were neatly stacked, the wires were mostly managed, and the faint scent of something delicious wafted from the kitchen. Candles flickered softly on the coffee table, casting a warm glow, and smooth jazz played at a respectable volume. Marcus stood there, looking undeniably handsome in a simple, dark shirt. He had even trimmed his beard. He grinned, a genuine, slightly nervous grin. Welcome to the new and improved Marcus Johnson experience, Emily. Apparently, living in your body taught me a few things about ambience. Emily laughed, a melodic, joyful sound. I see that, Marcus. I'm impressed. They sat down at his small dining table, which was adorned with placemats, a first for Marcus. He served her a delicious, perfectly seasoned salmon with roasted vegetables, a dish far more sophisticated than anything he had ever attempted before. They talked for hours, not about their swapped bodies or their past arguments, but about their dreams, their passions, their newfound perspectives on life. Marcus spoke about his music with a new clarity and purpose, thanks to Emily's influence. Emily shared her ideas for a truly innovative marketing campaign, infused with a creativity she hadn't dared to explore before. You know, Marcus said, looking at her across the candlelit table, his eyes warm, I honestly thought you were the most annoying person in the world, living next door. Always complaining about my music, my messes. Emily chuckled, stirring her wine. And I thought you were just a loud, lazy slob with no direction. Someone who would never amount to anything more than noise. She met his gaze, her smile softening. But then I was in your body, and I saw how hard you actually work, how much passion you have for your music. And I saw that beneath all the bravado, you're actually, really kind. Marcus reached across the table, taking her hand. His touch was warm and comforting. And I was in your body, Emily, and I saw how much pressure you put on yourself, how much you cared about doing things right. And I realized that beneath all the rules and order, you're actually incredibly strong. And beautiful inside and out. Their eyes met, and the air between them crackled with an unspoken acknowledgement of the deep affection that had blossomed between them. The past weeks had been a bizarre crucible, melting away their old selves and forging something entirely new and unexpected. Later, they moved to the sofa, sharing a blanket, watching a classic rom-com on Marcus's surprisingly organized TV. The movie, for once, didn't seem quite as outlandish as their own story. Outside, the night had turned rainy, a soft patter against the windows. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of lightning lit up the room, followed by a low rumble of thunder. Both Marcus and Emily instinctively jumped, their eyes wide, their hands gripping each other's. The room flickered for a brief second, then settled back into its candlelit glow. Marcus looked at Emily, a playful terror in his eyes. Don't tell me, he began, his voice a low, teasing whisper. Don't tell me it's not again. Emily burst out laughing, a joyous, uninhibited sound. She leaned her head against his shoulder, squeezing his hand. No, Marcus, she said, her voice filled with warmth and affection. Not again. Never again. They settled back into the sofa, the rain continuing its gentle song outside. But this time, the lightning wasn't a harbinger of chaos. It was a reminder of their journey, a beautiful, bizarre catalyst that had transformed two warring neighbors into two deeply connected souls, ready to embark on a new adventure together. Their story, born from a bolt of lightning and a spilled smoothie, had truly come full circle, proving that sometimes the most unexpected detours lead to the most beautiful destinations.